perhaps we can start with you just introducing yourself to our audience. Who are you? What do you do? Where you're located, and the like.
My name is Zach. I am a 21-year-old who has just graduated college and moved to San Francisco. During my sophomore year of college, I started creating some videos and later put them up on YouTube. And the idea behind the videos was they were queer, feminist, social justice-oriented parodies of pop songs that I enjoyed but thought were problematic in some aspect in their lyrics. And they kind of made the rounds around some blogs, and I have received an enormous amount of really wonderful positive feedback from people that I've enormously appreciated. That's me.
The song that we had, or what we were first initially drawn to because of the nature of our show being focused on gender variance in various capacities and how that then intersects with sexual identity as well as race, class, and all sorts of identity vectors, we were drawn to the ways that you neutralize gender language, particularly pronouns, in songs like Skater Person or Porn This Way. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about your choice, what brought you to wanting to render these songs gender neutral?
Yeah, so that was actually, I guess that's a part of my project I got to include in that description, but the original idea was, what I called it gender neutralizing, and the idea was that a lot of these pop songs lose a lot of their meaning once you take out the gender pronouns and become hilariously meaningless. And I think that the idea for the project actually started with me waking up with Skater Boy in my head randomly, because sometimes pop songs from the early 2000s just will randomly appear in my head because of how ingrained they are in my memory. And I, at this point, had some introduction to some of the kind of queer theory ideas that I encountered in college. So I knew words like heteronormativity now. And I thought of, he was a boy, she was a girl. Can I make it any more obvious? Like that, it could not be a more heteronormative line if it tried. And it's just kind of calling upon heteronormativity there and saying, like, yeah, we know these things, so I don't even have to tell you the first half of the story. Like, we got it. The script is already written. And so I wanted to see what it would look like to take out gender from a love song or, a story kind of romance song like that. And it did lose a ton of meaning. And it was interesting how many other kind of ideas were embedded in those songs once I started taking out gender pronouns. Like in Skater Person, there's in the second verse, there's the whole aspect of, this woman who is rejected, who the skater boy in the song is sad, and she's a single mother, and like we're supposed to kind of laugh at that, like, haha, you turned out like such a failure, and now he's a rock star and I'm a rock star with him. And there's so many kind of classism embedded in that. There's a lot of sexism. There's a lot of implicit racism, and that sort of kind of ridiculing people whose lives look different than a certain standard that is kind of built through heteropatriarchy and white supremacy. So it was really interesting to kind of excavate that, and really just by go through taking out all the pronouns and replacing them with they or ze or things like that.
I liked you had said that taking the gender pronouns out or rendering them neutral kind of made the song, this artifact, what did you say, hilariously meaningless. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about maybe comedy, maybe your use of comedy as a political tool or as an activist tool to kind of speak back to pop culture.
Yeah, for sure. I have always really enjoyed being funny. It's always been kind of one of my things. I'm queer and I'm Jewish, and I think there's a rich history within that of kind of turning to comedy to understand difficult situations in the world and understand a difficult history or a difficult present. Since I'm not really, the other important aspect for anyone who's listening who hasn't seen my videos before is that I'm not a musician. So I know how to play guitar, and I know how to sing with my voice, but neither of those are particularly great. And really what the videos were about was funny writing project, just in the form of music, because I was engaging with pop music. So yeah, I think humor can be incredibly powerful as a political tool, as all sorts of things. Humor gives pleasure, makes a lot of things accessible that are often really difficult concepts or really charged conversations. If I just taken someone's favorite song and said, there's also tons of comments on these videos of people who are like, but I love Lady Gaga, I hate you. Just taking a song that is really meaningful to people in some ways, and if I just wrote an essay tearing it apart, it might have a different impact than writing a silly, funny song that can be engaged with in a different way. And that is, I like to think that videos have a very lighthearted approach to talking about these issues, and I actually didn't originally create them to be accessible. I originally created them to be funny to my friends who took the same classes as me at the same college as me, and I was actually surprised by how many people were responding to them. So I think the humor really helped it be accessible even when the goal was not accessibility.
There was a point that you had drawn on earlier about how some of the pushback from folks who maybe hear this assume that because you're offering a criticism of some sort that you hate, be it Lady Gaga, be it Avril Lavigne. Can you speak a little bit on the importance of critique as a political tool as well as a way that maybe we queer the world around us and why that might be necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a kind of, it's this simple either-or logic that really derails so many important discussions, where it's like, oh, if you have an issue with this, then you must want to tear the whole thing down. You must hate all the people in this category. You must hate all the things like this. And I never bring hate into those conversations because I love these songs for the most part. I'm not a huge fan of the Katy Perry one or the Justin Bieber one or for the most part, I like all of them, and I actually love some of them. Like You Belong With Me, I think is such a good pop song. I have listened to it many, many times, more than I care to admit. And so it's really not about hate in these instances. It is, like you said, it's about the power of critique and the importance of still pointing out, these songs aren't perfect, and they rely on kind of a reinscribing of normative ideals very often, and so, some of them are just, like the You're So Gay song, I cannot deal with that song. Like, I think it's awful. Its lyrical content. But something like Skater Boy, like, there's a lot that's wrong with a song like that and how it chooses about talking about this romance. But it's also really fun and really, I loved it as a kid. Like, that's why it lingers in my head, and I still think it's a great song. And I think that I was actually having a conversation with someone yesterday who makes his own pop music, and he said something to the effect of that like a good pop song really kind of sticks with you and impacts you. And I think the necessary context is, because that could be I guess that could be a very generic phrase, but we were talking about like Kesha and things like that people normally don't think about. I was actually arguing that I really love this one Kesha song, and he's saying, well, a good pop song should stick with you in a way, and I was like, well, this one does. And I think there is this immense power in really invigorating, fantastic music that even if it's the same four chords that you hear all the time, and I think it's important to harness that and to continue that. Like, I'm not trying to tear down pop music, but to be thoughtful about how we're continuing that, because, hearing a song like Skater Boy when I was 10 years old or whenever that came out, and at that time not understanding my own queerness, and then once again hearing something like He Was a Boy, She Was a Girl, Can I Make It Any More Obvious? And then again having, connecting with and forming my identity with this piece of art that is kind of inscribing these morals and this way of understanding the world that was not going to fit in with my body and my future, and my presence even at that point. So I think this sort of approach is really important for just kind of picking apart and understanding what's already going on and starting the conversation about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like part of the power of critique, and I hear this kind of laid throughout your explanation just now, is that operating more or less from these various queer perspectives, whether one is identifying as trans, as genderqueer, as gender variant, queer writ large, whatever that is, that there is a certain experience where the impetus to critique is on our own experience because we are forced to see how these systems operate, meaning we are always already excluded from these discussions in pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very interesting that what I like about your music is it becomes very validating for me to see that, and to hear, I should say, that there's a way of, unfortunately, the work that you're doing is called subversive, but I don't consider it subversive. I think it's just literally rewriting what's already there so that maybe the rest of us can consume in some way as well. So I find it very fascinating there. And there's been more recently, your most recent video, your version of Blurred Lines. And Robin Thicke and his Blurred Lines has gotten a lot of press, particularly a lot of the criticism about whether or not it is sexist or not. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you did in this video, what you were trying to accomplish, and at least in my viewing, I think you offered one of the first critiques that I saw on YouTube of Robin Thicke's songs. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I also appreciate your reading of my work as not necessarily subversive, because that feels very kind of connected to what I'm trying to do, which is in my head when people have strong negative reactions to my work, I'm just like, I just wrote a little song, like, which is not necessarily to say that they can't have that reaction to what I'm doing, but for me, what I'm doing feels very innocent, and I'm also not necessarily claiming a lot of it, this is the correct thing. It's really just like, oh, I listened to the song, I noticed some things, I'm going to rewrite it. I think they might have gotten more intentionally trying to subvert things later on, which could be a really valid critique of how I was going about things. But yeah, for the most part, like, Skater Person was just like, I wonder what happens when you take out he and she from the song, and Boy and Girl. With Blurred Lines, that one was, I think it has progressed to a point where I'm just like a little bit attacking songs, but also attacking songs that I think are really fun and I enjoy a lot about. Like, I really enjoyed listening to Blurred Lines. I just think that the lyrics aren't very thoughtful, and I think the video is not necessarily very thoughtful. I'm not intentionally doing anything that kind of is calling upon rape culture, but I don't think it's fair to blame people who have been affected by that to say that they're wrong in their reading of it. And so my idea with that was to kind of start a conversation about consent in the lyrics of that song. I had been involved with a group called the Advocates for Survivors of Sexual Assault at my college for 3 years, and did a lot of education around consent and talking about the issues that underlie sexual violence. And so I was just kind of pulling from that a little bit to see what would happen if, instead of using the lyrics of Blurred Lines to kind of let rape culture run wild, that I could kind of point out the places in it in which consent is assumed, in which Robin Thicke's entitlement to women's bodies is kind of assumed and made visible, and to just be a little silly about it, because I also think that sex and that instances that involve negotiating consent in people's interactions with each other's bodies can be very silly and awkward and can be all sorts of things. And I think it's nice to put kind of jam-packed lyrics in there. Like, the lyrics don't really fit, which is another thing I go for in a lot of my songs, because you often can't say all the things you need to say if you need to check in with a partner in just one line in a pop song. Like, it's easier to say, I know you want it, than like, hey, I noticed that you're kind of pulling back, and I was just wondering if you'd be comfortable talking about why. Like, that, you can't really fit that in a pop song line, even though that feels more relevant to my experience. I've never had a sexual encounter with someone where I was just like, I know you want it, and everything just happens from there. Usually a conversation or two, and it's not always a comfortable one or not always an easy one. And it would be nice to have more tools, both for myself and partners and, for everyone, to talk about these things. And I think a lot of the tools that we have are from pop songs and movies, and like the places where it's coded that it's okay to talk about sex because we have this one way of talking about it, and we can just do it and it's fine. And it's really flashy and exciting and might not mirror real people's lives or give them real tools, but it's fun. So these are kind of the things that went into my decision to parody it. And then really just most of these are written in a few hours and then recorded in a few hours after that. So I get a little idea, I just see where it goes, and then I put it right up on YouTube.
The increasing representation and visibility of queer bodies in media, do you see yourself critiquing those representations in a similar playful fashion? Do you have thoughts on that type of representation that maybe you want to share a little bit with the audience?
Yeah, for sure. In music, I can't think of quite as much, although I know there are people. But yeah, I think in terms of my thoughts on that, I think that they're always mixed about things, because I think everything is complicated, and there are a lot of aspects of most of those portrayals that I've seen that make me really happy and feel validating, or feel like those are things that when I was younger and felt a great need for validation in my identity because I didn't really understand what it was and I hadn't really seen it around very much, that those things could have been really helpful for me. But I also think that they are not all of these, no matter what the person's identity is, it's one story, and a lot of them are one story that is maybe particular to people of certain racial identities, certain gender identities, and often if those are dominant ones, like if this is a white queer person, it's easy for the writers to maybe express this as like, here's the queer experience, like here's the trans experience, and aren't we revolutionary? When really there's a lot of queer experiences and a lot of all sorts of experiences around gender and sexuality, and I would love to just see more in general. I'd love to see really thoughtful ones, and yeah, I think if there's there was that like the gay country song that came out that I saw around. I don't know if you've heard of that. There was some young queer artist who had who's like a very muscle-bound, masculine white man who wrote a song about falling in love with another boy, and it was getting some considerable viewings on YouTube. But I mean, I guess that's the sort of thing I could engage with in the future. But part of, maybe this is an interesting thing for me to articulate about my project.
Right.
It might be that I feel more of a connection to critiquing the work of heterosexual and cisgender people making music, who are making that music specifically in ways that relies on heteronormativity, on cisnormativity, on misogyny, femphobia, on those sorts of systems, and kind of understanding how they connect more broadly to all sorts of systems. Yeah, so I don't know. I think for me also, my choice of songs comes on a very case-by-case basis. I see one and I kind of reach out and grab it, and like, this is it. Or in the case of some of the first few that I did, they were just suggestions that people said on my Facebook status. Like, a lot of people wanted Rihanna, so I did Rihanna. Even though I don't think that song is super problematic, but I just thought there were fun things I could do with it if I reconceptualized it as a song about non-monogamy instead of a song about the excitement of being the only girl in the world to your partner. But I guess that's interesting. That's something I would need to think about, and I actually hope to have the opportunity to think about that, because I think more visibility of bodies that are not normative in their sexualities and genders in media would be awesome. And I don't mean my awesome uncritically, but I think, I don't know, that's something that speaks to me, and I think speaks to the needs of a lot of, especially queer and trans young people who might look to popular media to validate their identities pretty regularly.
I like to focus on ways that we can individually as well as collectively speak back to messages of pop culture, larger systemic level. And I feel like your channel is a really prime example of how those of us at the quote bottom, whatever that bottom looks like, are able to use the tools at our disposal to speak back in some capacity. And so I'm wondering if, as someone who in our discussion, this isn't something that you intended to become famous for or anything along those lines per se. And I would imagine that you're just doing the work that you want to do, right? It's just part of your life.
Right.
And so I'm kind of speak to the audience about what it means to, how this as a form of activist work is just a means of doing what you can. Can you speak a little bit about that, about those who maybe have the itch and want to do work like this, but maybe they're afraid to do so? They feel like they need license to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might have some platform to speak on that because that is also how I felt. I originally did not put the videos up on YouTube. I was afraid of doing that. I knew I would get weird comments, or I thought I'd just get no views whatsoever, and that would be even worse. Or I think I had a lot of hesitation about it, and I think that's also a real thing for people to consider in terms of people remembering that their concerns might be really valid too. If someone, like, I've gotten plenty of people using special words that start with F in reference to me and my sexuality and gender expression on there. I've also had a lot of people calling me straight on there, which I think might be worse. And there's a shocking number of people who think I'm just this straight guy who's like looking to get ladies because I'm like talking about feminism and stuff. And heteronormativity is incredible. Like, no matter how much no matter what I talk about and how much I flap my wrist while I'm doing it, like they will still continue to read me as straight if it can be used as a way to demean me. Which is just really interesting. So yeah, I mean, these are real things to think about. At the same time, I'm so glad I did it, and these are just messages that speak to me. I think I find a lot of importance connecting as a cis queer guy. I find a lot of importance in connecting the things that speak to me to trans issues, to feminism. I think they're deeply interconnected with queer issues. I think they're formative of one another. They're also deeply interconnected with race issues and class issues and all sorts of issues of identity and humanity, and that's important to keep in mind in each one. But I think it's also okay to understand the limitations in your scope, or understand where your focus is, and be thoughtful about. But yeah, that I think it has been a really valuable experience for me to see that the messages that speak to me that I think are important, and the ways that I want to articulate those and connect to my experiences and connect them to the media that matters to me, speaks to a lot of people, or speaks to anyone really. And I think you don't get the chance to see that until you put your work out there in some respect. And there have been people who commented on my videos saying, when I see your videos, I feel less alone. And I can feel my body getting more emotional when I think about that one. And I've talked about it so many times. And there's I also just woke up. And there's no reason that should be impacting me like this, but that sort of comment is so important and valuable for me, and people will write longer messages. There were some really incredible ones on the Naughty that I was so surprised about how much that spoke to people. I think there's not enough conversation around virginity and the lies inherent in it, and the heterosexism and misogyny and awful things that are, kind of embedded in this idea. And there are a lot of queer people in kind of, I guess, broad find who want to talk about how virginity didn't fit their sexuality and didn't fit their experiences or hurt them. And there are some people who shared stories on there, and it was really incredible. So yeah, I think the important thing is you can never judge your own work. It's just not possible. I don't understand how I'm a really, really self-critical person, and so what I did is I'm just taking this out of my hands. I just can't judge it. Other people like it, so I have to trust them. And that's awesome. I would just impulsively post them. I'd have to just get in this creative, and then finish it and be yes, I finished it, and then post it. And then that was the drive I needed to put it on the internet and have other people see it. But I think it's something that if you are interested in it, or you have an inkling about it, I think it's a good idea to evaluate your situation. I use that being prescriptive, because I'm I can think of all the ways in which maybe someone is concerned about putting this work out there and who's going to see it and things like that. But if you can make that evaluation and you know that logically it's going to be okay to talk about the things you want to talk about gender or sexuality or whatever it is that your art is engaging with in maybe a critical way or a way that you think is going to get pushed back on. I say do it because someone's going to find you, like the way the internet functions now, like if you want to write about trans identity in a pop song and you put it up on the internet and you just give it the right tags, people on Tumblr are going to find you, like young trans folks are going to find you and really appreciate that you're doing that work, whether or not it's like for technically great. Mine's not technically great. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I think it's wonderful, personally.
Well, thank you.
Well, Zach, I'm going to go ahead and wrap the interview up, the phone call, I guess I should say. But I want to thank you again for agreeing to do this interview.
For sure.
I'm hoping that
I appreciate you getting in touch with me and doing this interview. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you much. And I'll talk to you very soon, okay? And
that sounds wonderful.
Good luck in San Francisco. Lucky you.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much. I'm very excited.
Yes. All right. Well, you take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.